As you wrote in the book, since Xi Jinping came to power in late 2012, he has turned much of China's political, economic, and foreign policy on its head. So why did he do that? Why was he so determined?
I think one of the most insightful speeches that we have, and an associated leaked document, which is document number 9, which came out in 2013, 2014. And the associated speech with it, which was Xi Jinping's address, I think in July of 13.
But it was never actually released officially.
That's true. There's a complex sub-debate about the speech and the document, about what was officially released, which was something this long, the full speech was this long, and then they got document number 9 over here. Anyway, without boring everyone senseless about all of that, the bottom line is, it is very early in his period, but it is Xi Jinping, as I say, unbuttoned on what he really thinks about ideology and propaganda. And it is, the language used in it is quite stark in terms of his identification of the centrality of the ideological unraveling that he feared was occurring within the Communist Party. He uses quite frank expressions such as, there are many, many contradictions, 矛盾, which have emerged over the previous 35 years, which my predecessors have not addressed. And therefore, I must now deal with the imbalances in development. And so in that speech, what you see, I think, are the emblematic elements of 3 significant ideological changes coming out of his belief structure. Number 1 is the party itself has become relegated. And we cannot, as Chinese communists, allow that to continue to happen. And it's the origins of what I describe as Xi Jinping's clear assertion that he will now take Chinese politics back to the Leninist left. That is, with a much more centrally empowered party. You know, his aphorism, which he borrows from Mao, it doesn't matter whether it's north, south, east or west, whether it's the party, or whether it's politics, whether it's the military, whether it's the economy, whether it's society, whether it's the academy, the party leads in all. It's a pretty unambiguous statement. On his Marxism, you see less of this in his 2013 speech, more of it by the time you get to 2017, but also an indication that the impact of this sustained period of market-based economic reforms has been actually corrupting the party. And remember, this is the year that he launches the anti-corruption campaign, which is the longest continuing campaign in party history as of today. And the third thing you see in this, this early speech is what I describe as his nationalist theme, which is him saying it is time for the party to cease apologising for its qualities. It's time for China to cease apologising for, quote, not being like the West. And there is a cri de coeur, almost a call to arms, to saying it's time to assert instead why China is different, why the Chinese Communist Party is different, and to take the fight on in the international community, rather than being in a passive position, for example, and defensive on questions of Marxist-Leninist doctrines of human rights. Let us go on the offensive and in fact attack the double standards in the West and defend that which we are doing here more aggressively. So you ask, how or why did he make those changes? I think you see the kernel of them all quite early in this pretty much unbuttoned and frank speech, which then is not just left hanging there as a piece of speechcraft, but then is reinforced by document number 9, which is in fact an instruction to the Chinese system about ideological tightening.
Kevin, I wonder if, you know, we had this period when Deng Xiaoping came to power when ideology was much less important. And so you went through this period, 1989, and then you went through Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao. I wonder if Xi Jinping didn't think emphasizing Leninism, emphasizing the importance of the party, if he didn't think, you know, without ideology, what am I? I'm just another tin pot dictator, right? so buoyed and sort of ideology then might have occurred to him as a kind of a intellectual system, a flotation device that gave him some legitimacy, placed him in history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Without it, he really is nothing more than another big leader.
I agree with you, Orville, that the totalizing dimensions of Marxism-Leninism provides an integrated worldview. It is not just viewing the world through the lens of historical materialism, which is the evolution from slave societies through to communist societies. It's not just a view of dialectical materialism, which is here are the conflicts in society and the economy and politics today, which we, the Leninist Party, will advance by our direct intervention in history. It provides you not just with a millenarian destination point, going back to our Roman Catholic analogies, it provides you with an ideological methodology for interpreting reality on the way through. And so to your point, you can either be, as it were, in the Chinese historical tradition, an emperor, and then anchored in the deep but mysterious cosmology of the Son of Heaven, or you have an integrated ideological worldview about the future of Chinese society, the future of China in the world as a continuing revolutionary force.
And Xi Jinping then becomes sort of part of destiny.
That's true. And so, within the history of the Chinese Communist Party, the leader back to Mao's day, and even before Mao, if you go back to the earliest days of the contested foundings of the party after 21, when Mao was not, as you know, preeminent leader until after Zuni in 35, 36, each purported leader of the Chinese Communist Party has to have been a former philosopher king. That is, the interpreter of the ideological tradition and the definer of it. You said before that Deng Xiaoping didn't place much emphasis on ideology. Yes and no. No, if you look at the size of his oeuvre, but at the get-go, when he's dealing with the Maoist ideological excesses of the past, he uses ideology, Marxism-Leninism, to point to the fact that Mao was in error in departing from the orthodoxy of 1956, when the Central Committee determined that the central challenge for the party for the future was unleashing the factors of production, that is growing the economy, as opposed to being preoccupied with the relations of production, which is class struggle. And if you like, these are the two dynamics or the two dialectical forces in this evolving debate within the party over nearly 100 years. Are you going to emphasise class equality, or are you going to unleash the factors of production to grow the country, grow the strength of the economy, and to lift people's living standards on the way through? What is your central priority? And Deng had one set of conclusions about that, which Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao followed. Mao had a completely different set of conclusions. And Xi Jinping is seeking to find a way through, which is somewhere between those two traditions. So I think you are right. It is the organising principle. It is a belief structure. The number of times Xi Jinping uses Xinyang, something we normally associate with religious belief, being rebaptized in faith. The faith is Marxism-Leninism. Read his speech on the 200th anniversary of the birth of Marx in 2018. It's a fascinating speech. I cover it in the text there, where he refers to Das Kapital as the Bible of the working class, the Shengjing of the working class. So on the faith question, the belief question, the totalizing ideology / theology of the system, you're right, it occupies this role as well.
And he, as we were speaking about earlier, he actually mentions the risks of China losing its soul, which is losing Marxism-Leninism. This, again, this kind of strange equation of faith, whether we usually think of it in religious terms, but for him, it's in ideological terms.
Yeah, the analogies between the language of ideology and the language of faith, as reflected in the Xi Jinping canon, is quite strong. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The term faith, Xinyang, occurs repeatedly. being rebaptized in Marxism-Leninism is a term which he uses conspicuously. As you said before, not losing our 灵魂, our soul, which is a Marxist-Leninist soul, is his constant invocation to the party. The party being aware still of its founding mission, its 出发, and its 使命. These are missionary terms of the early church, and so you can see the architecture of this quite clearly. Therefore, I go back to my overall thesis. Ideology matters. It has mattered for 100 years in a Marxist-Leninist party as both an organizing principle, as a principle of politics through the power of the Leninist party, but frankly also as an economic vision for the country and therefore for China in the world, but also China's future role in the world. And so therefore, I simply argue through the book, we need to rediscover its significance as an explanatory mechanism for Chinese behaviours in the world. It's not the single explanatory mechanism, and I say this, explanatory factor, and I say this a lot in the book. There are multiple other factors as well, but we've ignored this one.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。